Research Institute. Gerald Celente, his team produces the Trends Journal, hard-hitting, in-depth analysis of the economic, sociopolitical, and cultural trends shaping the world. Hello, Gerald.
Hello, Chris.
The topic on everyone's mind today, precious metals. More dovish comments from the FOMC meeting last week. Investors are loading up on gold and silver. It looks like the Fed governors, they want to hold rates near zero, add as much liquidity as necessary to try to keep this feeble economic recovery going. What do you think, Gerald?
Wasn't this the summer of recovery? That's what Vice President Joe Biden called it. And what happened to all those green shoots? They wither and go away. Well, we've been forecasting gold $2,000 an ounce. We call the bottom of gold virtually in December of 2001, just a little off the bottom, when we announced the beginning of the gold bull run. It's right there in our Trends Journal. It was $275 an ounce. And so what we're looking at here is a global meltdown. The crash of 2010 that we said would happen is happening. We didn't say it was going to be a stock market crash. We're looking at a currency crisis. And here's something else that's going on, Chris, that people should be very aware of if they're not already. And that is, in an effort to increase exports, countries are devaluing their currencies. Whether it's the Swiss, the Japanese, around the world. They're trying to drive the value of the Chinese, drive the currency down so they can export more. Oh, wonderful. Keep printing all that digital money that's not worth the paper it's not printed on, so your manufacturers could sell more stuff and the rest of the people in the country really suffer because of it. So the smart money is going away from the paper money and moving into gold. Current events form future trends. Look what's going on in the news. From Ireland to Portugal to Spain to Greece to Lithuania, Slovenia, all across the continent, people are taking to the streets in protest of these so-called austerity measures that really are nothing more than taxing the people more, paying them less, giving them less benefits, taking away pensions so they could bail out the banks. You think it makes people angry?
I think you said it best when you said the smart money's rolling into the yellow metal. $1,300 last week, first time in history. This week even higher. Of course, very volatile, but you'd expect that in the only sound currency remaining out there. And you talk about currency crashes. Well, look at the U.S. dollar, Gerald. That unbelievable head and shoulders in the weekly pattern broke down beginning last week, and it continues this week. Some folks are calling for a free fall. James Turk for one. It looks like the Fed is simply the gold crowd's best friend here.
Well, and not only the Fed, it's the central banks. I mean, look at that liar Trichet over there with that arrogance of them. They were going to start, raising rates in December. What am I, stupid? I remember what he said. And they were never going to bail out the Greeks. It was against the Lisbon Treaty to bail out other countries in the EU when they ran into problems. So what they do is they keep changing the rules to bail out the banks. Bottom line, you've heard me say it over and over again, bullets, bombs, and banks. That's the business they're in, and when they start losing money, they start taking it from the rest of the people. So there's no way they can print their way out of it. And when they announced last week that there would be more monetary easing, well, we saw what happened. And that's why we're on the gold bull run. And as you well know, Chris, adjusted for inflation, gold should be selling over $2,300 an ounce.
You've been forecasting $2,000 plus gold for quite some time. The investment bankers, they're stepping up to the plate here, Gerald. Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, some of the others, projections ranging from $1,600 to $2,000. The other interesting aspect of this is that the current ratio of around 60-1 on gold to silver suggests price north of $26 to $33 an ounce. James Turk calling for $30 perhaps in a few weeks if the short squeeze unfolds.
I'm 80% invested in gold. I've been making it clear for years. You can hear it all over. You read about it, listen to it. I say it everywhere I go. And that's most of my investment. And I always get a kick, by the way, out of these white shoe boys from these banks. They keep coming up from these investment houses that are late on the draw and then say where it's going to go next. That just drives me nuts, They didn't see it coming, and now they predict what's next. And actually, the media's favorite Dr. Doom there, Nouriel Roubini, you look back at him, just Google it up, he said that gold was lucky to break over the $1,100 mark. He doubted that. And then he said that anyone that believes that gold would go to 2,000, it's nonsense. Nonsense is the word. He said, not nonsense, the paper's worth no sense, capiche?
Over the weekend, the European central bankers announced their halt to gold sales. This is a true sea change event here. It ends you might say, 10-year selling spree. What do you think of the significance of the European central bankers halting their gold sales?
Well, actually, one of the things I would never thought I would be fond of is Twitter.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I tweet every day. It's the great one-liners. We use it very differently than just to say what we're doing, where we're going, new trends journals out. No, we riff on the news. And that's one of the riffs I did this week about the central banks. After 10 years, as you mentioned, since 1999, of selling gold, now they're no longer sellers. Does that tell you where gold is going? And here's what we're very concerned about, I have to tell you, in all honesty. We believe there's going to take draconian measures in the future to curtail gold sales. And they're going to blame all of this, what's going on people like me and you and others, investors. I'm not speculating, and I make it clear in the Trends Journal. Gold is for my golden age. I don't trade them. I play the markets, but I buy gold for my dear Aunt Zizzy, may her soul rest in peace. At 86 years old, she looked at me and said, Gerald, when you get old, make sure you have money. And gold is my money for my golden years. So they're going to blame it on people like us for creating this crisis that they created by selling this country and every other country out to keep filling the habit of the money junkies, the bankers, the money heroin addicts that can't get enough. So they keep printing more so they don't have to take any losses.
About a year and a half ago, they hauled George Soros before a congressional hearing regarding the oil run. And you'll remember that spectacular climb from around $30 a barrel up to $147 on a chart practically parabolic. He said there is a percentage of this, a portion of this is due to speculation, but the rest is supply and demand fundamentals. They're going to start pointing the finger and looking for scapegoats. Who knows who winds up on that list?
And this isn't speculation. Mm-hmm. This is smart people as far as I'm concerned, because I don't want to be accused of telling people what to invest in. So that's why I'm saying that in tongue-in-cheek, is because I'm not permitted to tell people what to invest in as a forecaster. But for me, I'm doing it because, as I said, I know the game here. You just can't keep printing money endlessly and not devaluing the currency. And remember, that's the game being played now. It's a global currency devaluation. And you see it with China. You see it with Japan. You see it with the French, and you see it with the Europeans. They're all trying to lower the value of their currencies so their manufacturers could be more competitive in the export markets. That's another aspect of it that very few people are talking about right now, which to me is one of the fundamental drivers along with the other drivers that you've mentioned, such as the Fed dumping trillions into the system to bail it out.
When we look at that $2,300 target, comparing the peak of 1980, adjusted for inflation, put us over $2,000 an ounce on gold. But there are many folks now proposing that that may be conservative. For instance, the Omnis Senior Managing Director, Jim Rickards, was interviewed on CNBC last week, and he sees the dollar collapse catapulting the metal to brand new highs, perhaps as high as $5,000 an ounce.
I think they're going to intervene before it goes to that price. That's what I'm concerned about. They could stop trading it. You know, they could blame it on terrorists or your Aunt Tilly, whatever they could come up, whatever they could dream up. I believe, and that's why I'm a buyer now and have been, because I think the door is going to close at some point. Because, as you well know, there's just not enough metal out there, you know, that's going to be able to meet demand. So I think before it gets to 5,000, I mean, it's just my own personal feeling, I think they're going to put restrictions on it or make some kind of a peg that's going to keep it at that level. They recalled gold once before in the 30s, and they could do it again now in 2010. Matter of fact, interesting you mentioned that. Just before I took this call, we're finishing up our Autumn Trends Journal. I mentioned what's going on in Europe with all of the strikes going on, and they're looking at it as a one-dimensional issue, as though it's economic, but it's bigger. It's revolution. It's revolution. It's three-dimensional. It's being played out in Technicolor live. Turn on the TV tonight. You'll see it. Not on the U.S. stations, but the other ones. Because it's revolution, then it's going to be followed by war. We're in the 1930s all over again. And that's the way we're looking at it. Because you know what else you have going on, Chris? You also have these nationalistic parties forming. All the pieces are coming together. Is there a Hitler yet or a Mussolini? Well, I mean, Berlusconi's, not the greatest guy. When you look at what's going on, even in Sweden, they just elected a strong anti-immigration platform. So you're going to start seeing the rumblings very similar to what's going on in the 1930s. This is the summer of the grasshopper and the ant. The summer is ended. The grasshoppers believed in the summer of recovery. The ants are the ones that are going to be able to survive the economic winters that are ahead of us. We believe, unless the trends are reversed, and unless the people take action, stand up, and really speak out, we're going to go, we know we're going into the greatest depression. We're very concerned it's going to be followed by the Great War.
Generally speaking, though, Gerald, I'm sure you'd agree that most of those dislocations and wars that erupted, there was huge unemployment, and that lack of income left people feeling like they had no alternative other than to grasp for whatever they could find, and then that's where those dictators seem to have risen to power. Do you see something similar this time?
Well, you know my saying, when people lose everything and they have nothing left to lose, they lose it, and that's what's going on. I call it fascist. And fascism, by the way, has come to America. You look what's going on now with these new laws being put in place, the new wiretapping laws, email tapping laws.
They can walk right onto your property now, the feds, and put a GPS right on your bumper. And in L.A., Gerald, this story just broke this week, they have a little dart gun. The police officer behind you can shoot a GPS dart onto the bumper of your car using a laser beam, and it stays active for up to 3 days.
No, I didn't know that. But I knew about them being the courts allowing them to put GPS signals under our cars. So you can't call it socialism, it's fascism. And that's the mistake people are making. It's the merger of state and corporate powers at every level. AIG, Citigroup, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, let's go down the list. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. You have a handful controlling virtually everything in virtually every field, from pharmaceutical to the media, to retail, to banking. You just go down, agriculture, you go down the list. So what we're saying is that we're looking at the 1930s in very, very, very stark ways. You see it in front of us. So people should be very aware of what's going on. And as you've heard me say this before, we believe there's going to be a bank holiday, and they're going to use some kind of reasoning to make it happen. Whether it's a terrorist strike, and now we know terror alerts are going up again. Whether it's a financial crisis, such as gold skyrocketing past the 2,000 mark. Whether it's a meltdown on the thinly traded stock markets, something that's going to cause a national emergency. And you mark my words, Chris, when that national emergency happens, just like they did it under Bush when they got 92% of the people in favor of attacking Afghanistan, the vast majority will support the commander-in-chief.
When you talk about them sort of suspending the trade of precious metals, and of course there is always that secondary market like eBay, by putting a portion of the typical listener's wealth and portfolio into gold and silver, physical bullion, at least they'll be crystallizing their wealth so that when this blows over, and maybe there is another world war, as you're alluding to, but once that passes, at least there will be a nest egg to build upon.
When 9/11 happened, I was prepared for it. I wrote about it, and you can look it up. Go to our website, December 14th, 2000. Go to our forecast list. You see 9/11. The USA Today did a story 9 months before on December 14th, 2000. I wrote 2001. They wrote 2001 won't be our year, Trent Sear says, and I warned of a wave of anti-Americanism and that Americans wouldn't be safe at home or abroad. And I've been writing about terror. So when 9/11 happened, I had my gold, I had my guns, and then I was ready to leave if they hit the Indian Point nuclear power plant 45 miles north of New York City. I was going to head north because I know this area. And all we're saying is prepare for the worst. If the worst doesn't happen, you didn't lose anything. If the worst happens and you're not prepared, then you lose everything.
Well, listen, you've been very generous with your time. So as this discussion comes to a close, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about this 22% unemployment rate that you've talked about in some of your previous Trends Journal reports. Of course, this is the estimate from the U6 number that John Williams at Shadow Stats refers to, and it's based on this official government methodology from the 1980s. This translates into roughly 34 million Americans out of work. That's untenable. Another 43 million on food stamp cards. Everyone thinks everything is okay, but really that comes out to 1 in 8 Americans relying on the government to put food on the table.
And again, let's look global. What are the unemployment rates over in Spain? They're over 20%. You're looking at young people between the ages, I believe, like something like 18 to 25. It's like 56%. Now you have these, young guys, with nothing to do other than having time on their hands. You have a volatile situation. You go throughout Europe, it's like that. And then you hit the places in the Middle East, the same thing, Egypt, Jordan, other countries. So you're looking at a very volatile situation. By the way, I want to make this offer. We're very concerned about being led into the next great war. And I say this because when all else fails, that's what they do. They take you to war. So for all listeners out there, you don't want to subscribe, fine, but contact us. Tell them they heard me on your show, and we'll give them the Spring Trends Journal, which is all about the Great War and how to prepare for it for free. We want to stop this war before it happens. We want people to be aware. If the people rise up and stand up and learn enough, it doesn't have to happen. The future is in your hands.
Exactly right, because there's considerable evidence, mounting evidence, Gerald, that the powers that be are doing their very best vis-a-vis the New World Order to reduce the population by up to 90 to 95%. And what better way to do it than full-scale world war?
Yes, unfortunately. So that's why we're making the Trends Journal available. The Spring Trends Journal, just go to our website, trendsresearch.com, go to the contact form and, hit the thing, and our staff will send it out to anyone. This is our bread and butter, but we don't care because it's more important that people are aware of what's happening and take proactive measures not only to secure their own safety, but to stop this atrocity from moving further. Listen, as we're talking, they're sending predator drones into Pakistan. Those are called extrajudicial killings, and they're always killing, quote, suspected militants. What's suspected? All of a sudden, suspected means guilty? So you're going to have blowback here, and the wars are spreading. We want to stop it before it's out of control.
It's what they call collateral damage, Gerald, and you're right, nothing but blowback. Gerald, as always, it's a real pleasure hearing your thoughts, and hope that you will return soon to the show.
Oh, I always love being on with you, Chris. Thank you.